All right. What we're going to talk about today, we got 40 minutes, how we're going to spend that. I want to talk a little bit about what is a vulnerability disclosure program, what is a bug bounty program, why would we even create one of those, are you ready, what should you consider before you start a bug bounty program, and then I'll talk a little bit about our own Google Play Security Rewards program, which is called a GPSRP. So whenever I say GPSRP from now on, it's Google Play Security Reward Program. Starting off with what is a vulnerability disclosure program / bug bounty program? And in general, a vulnerability disclosure program is just a standardized way for security researchers to interact with you as developers, to disclose vulnerabilities towards an organization. So if you have an application or you have a company with many applications and you become popular, then there's a very high likelihood that at one point security researchers either accidentally, because they're users of your app, come across security bugs or privacy issues, and they want to report them to you. Or maybe you're so popular that you become a target for white hat hackers, as they're usually called, to check out your app, your website, whatever, and try to find stuff, try to report it to you for whatever reasons. So what you want to have first as a security rewards program, for vulnerability disclosure program, the first thing you want to have is a policy page. And I would strongly encourage you to check out already existing policy pages of big companies for that, for the very reason that they're getting a lot of reports and you will learn a lot from the pages that they send out, because what you will see, for example, is that they're very detailed, they very clearly limit scope, they very clearly limit the rules of engagement for a security test, they very clearly set out what you can expect from them if you report something, and so on. And a couple of the ones that were linked here, and it's my understanding that you will also get the slides at one point afterwards, because I gave the PDF file to the organizers here, so I assume they're going to publish it. You can check out the GM one, Instacart one, Cloudflare, Khan Academy. We randomly picked those because they seem to have very nicely structured policy pages. You can just check them out. A bug bounty program goes a little bit beyond what a vulnerability disclosure program is. It's very similar, but with the one addition that you actually decide to financially reward researchers. That means you pay some money for them, for example. It doesn't have to be money like a straight check. For example, United Airlines at one point, they probably still have that, but they pay out like 1 million miles for high security features or bugs that are found on their website to security researchers. And with 1 million miles, you can make a lot of transatlantic business class flights on United. And so that's very nice too, even if it's not like a straight money payment. Usually, the bounties are paid out according to the severity and impact of the bug. And that's already a kind of a thing that you have to consider yourself, right? Like, how do you decide what is the right amount of payment for a certain issue, and what is actually in scope, right? Because usually, if you start with a website and you've never really done an in-depth security analysis of your website, you're going to get a lot of like cross-site scripting bugs, for example. Should probably be in scope. But then there are other things like, oh, if I do this, then maybe it's a soft denial of service of some sort. Do you really want to pay out for that? Unclear. It really depends on your own threat model in that sense. Oh, hands up. Who actually has a bug bounty program for their application or for their company? Nobody has a bug bounty program. Who has a vulnerability disclosure program where you have like a structured documentation to interact with security researchers? Also nobody. All right. Hopefully I can inspire at least a few of you. So how does a vulnerability disclosure program usually look like? It's fairly simple. Someone discovers a vulnerability in one of your products or your website or whatever, and then in an ideal case, they try to report that to you, meaning they try a couple of standard things. Usually if they're an experienced researcher, for example, they they may try to send an email to security at your domain name, right? And so it would be very nice if you actually had for your domains a security at email box set up that you can respond to. It will also be very nice if you make it just discoverable on your website how someone should report security bugs as the very bare minimum, because if you don't do that, there's a high chance that if you're important enough that someone is just going to post it on Twitter or Pastebin, and then it's going to escalate from there. So, what you got to do when you receive a ticket from a security researcher? Well, first thing is, you got to determine, is it in scope or is it not in scope? For vulnerability disclosure, where you don't actually pay out rewards, it's probably in scope, because there's nothing for you to argue about, really. Just accept it and see if it's really an issue that you need to have fixed, or if it's behavior that you can work with. And we get security issues sometimes where we just say, no, this is intended behavior, or this is at least better than the alternatives. And there can be disagreements with security researchers, of course. For a bug bounty program, you definitely want to also double make sure that it's in scope, because only security issues that are in scope are actually security issues that get rewarded financially, usually, right? And if the issue is in scope, you start negotiating with the security researcher, and you should actually document that kind of stuff in your public-facing documentation. Like, the negotiation is usually, oh, how fast can I disclose that to the public? The security researcher very often has an incentive to disclose to the public, because that's how they build a resume, right? And so there's a lot of people, especially from Southeast Asia, who really go after all kinds of bug bounty programs they can get to essentially build a resume, attract the bigger companies, for example, the Googles of the world, and the other companies that have a very mature bug bounty or security team process. So you gotta discuss, and you want to keep the security researcher in the loop. What security researchers really don't like is that when they get cut off from communication, and so it's definitely good if you give them a couple of guidelines, like, oh, we're going to start triage, I'll send you an update in 3 days, and then you have to follow up in 3 days, even if you don't really have an update, just to say, I don't have an update yet, we haven't finished triage of the issue yet, but let's give us another 5 days or whatever. Usually there's an industry guideline for security researchers that says if the thing is not patched after 90 days, then I'm just going to go public with it, and you're going to handle the fallout as a developer. And it took very many years to establish that, and there's a lot of discussions around, is that the right thing to do, or is it not the right thing to do? For what it's worth, I think it's the right thing to do, and I have opinions that I can share in private, but ultimately, you and the security researcher, you have to work towards a solution that makes everybody happy, right? And if you're a bug bounty program, you can also, if you have one of those, you can set terms like, you can only talk about it after it has been fixed. If you talk about it before that or whatever, then we're just not going to pay out. So you kind of have to balance the payout as a threat that you can withhold against the researcher's urge to disclose stuff to the public. So why would you create one of those if you're only going to have to interact with security researchers? And let's take an example for that. Here's a beautiful gold nugget company, Bob's Nuggets. It's an application that helps people buy, sell precious metals from each other, right? So peer-to-peer gold buying and selling application, which sounds like a terrible idea in the first place, but that's how it is. So the application obviously handles sensitive data, because I want to meet random people with my sack of gold, and I want to hand it over to them again for payment. And so we're going to need some name, gold inventory, home address, and so on to facilitate these peer-to-peer trades. And now we've got Abby, right? Abby's a security consultant, and she loves gold. And so she's going to use your Bob's Nuggets application. And because she's a security researcher, she notices weird things in your application that kind of set her off. And after a little bit of digging, she recognizes that there's a bug in your application that actually exposes all kinds of home addresses and gold inventories to everybody without any kind of proper protection. And so what happens next is critical, and you as developers, you kind of have a choice now that you can make, right? And you can say, So the first thing that happens is, how does Abby actually get to establish a path of communication with the Bob's Nuggets developer? And as I mentioned earlier, it would be really nice if all of you had a security at your domain that security researchers can use, or you had easily discoverable terms and conditions, or however you want to be notified. And so Abby tries that, doesn't find anything, files a ticket for the support staff, that is help desk, frontline support. They have no idea what's going on. So Abby is frustrated, so she writes a blog post about that and exposes your application and the private data around it to the whole world. And you don't really want to be in that situation, because now suddenly a random tech journalist on Twitter who follows Abby maybe, the tech journalist sees that, writes an article about it, and now you're on Wired or BuzzFeed or whatever, and it says, Bob's Nugget helps every criminal find like gold stashes in people's homes. And that's the point that you really want to avoid, right? And I work on Google Play in the malware detection side, and so I get to handle PR fallout like every week, and it's the least exciting thing that can possibly happen, because usually a tech journalist comes to you and says, I need a statement in 1 hour, and you don't even know what's going on, and there's never any way to actually meet the turnaround times for tech journalists. And so you never want to be on the receiving end of PR fallout. I think that's the most important thing. So how can we do better? Let's take a look at the second scenario. All right, Abby tries again to find a way to communicate with Bob's Nuggets. Maybe Abby this time gives up but doesn't blog about it, right? But that just means is that in your application, the bugs are going to sit around until a more malicious actor than Abby discovers them, right? And it's only a matter of time if you're a high value target for someone to rediscover the same bug that Abby had. And yeah, at this point, someone can steal the user data, sell it to other people who may find the idea of knowing where gold is stashed to be valuable. If you're unlucky, you're still going to end up in the news, because at one point someone's going to find out, oh, here's an inventory list on Pastebin that someone left behind or whatever, and then you're scrambling again for the PR fallout. Okay, so how can we do even better? If we actually had a bug bounty program, or at least a vulnerability coordination program, then there's a clear path for Abby to discover how she can get in contact with the Bob's Nuggets developers. And the first thing you got to learn as a developer that you have to be very grateful to security engineers if they report something to you. And that's a very, so first they do your service, but they also like to be treated like they do your service. And if you deal with security researchers for a while, what you're going to learn is that they're very fickle for the most part, and they have very big egos. And if you think software engineers have very big egos, deal with security engineers for a while, and then it's very complicated occasionally. So you want to be very appreciative, and yeah, just thank Abby. Make sure to go through the steps, do the triage, is it in the scope? If it's in the scope, pay her out, Abby is happy. Maybe she never even publishes about that, nobody's ever going to hear. And Abby knows she's going to get financially rewarded, she's going to get treated well, she's going to look for more bugs in your application, and then she's going to report more. And then you can avoid all of the PR fallout, you can avoid all of the breach issues, hopefully too, where your data is stolen and so on. So that would be an ideal scenario. So why would we create one of those beyond what I just showcased to you in the example scenario? The very first step, I've repeated it multiple times already, it's a structured way for accepting vulnerability reports. And you really want to have that, because as soon as your application becomes popular, someone will want to report security vulnerabilities to you. It doesn't even matter if you pay out or not. Once again, take a look at the process and the policy statements of the more experienced application developers. I mentioned a couple earlier, but usually what's inside these policies are things like rules of engagement, as in you don't want to encourage any kind of white-hat security researcher to actually go download all of your customer database just because they can, right? You should make, a legitimate researcher usually doesn't do that, but you should also make it explicit and says, hey, if you come across user data, maybe download one record of user data, ideally your own or that of a test account, but don't just dump our whole SQL database or whatever you have, because that would be very bad. Scope, obviously, what kind of security bugs are in scope that you are willing to pay out. Reward structure, how much are you going to pay out? Maybe for a very low severity, low impact bugs. You don't want to pay out much. Maybe it can just be a t-shirt or other swag that your company provides. Contact points, most important, set up security at yourdomain.com. Continuous security testing helps find and fix bugs before they exploit it. You want to get to it before the black hat hackers come at your application. Now, for what it's worth, a bug bounty program or vulnerability disclosure program is not in any way a replacement for an actual secure development lifecycle at your application, be it secure practices, secure architecture, be it, depending on your sensitivity, external security companies who may come in, pen test you, application test you, and so on. But it's a nice bonus. It may highlight gaps in your existing security process, and maybe you'll be able to patch those. Because if your application, let's take an example, if your application has a lot of SQL injection issues, maybe it's time to rethink how you interact with your SQL databases. Likewise, if your website has a lot of cross-site scripting problems, maybe it's time to think about, am I using the right libraries to create secure websites that are not vulnerable to cross-site scripting. It augments your existing security resources. And I really mean it, it only augments that. It's like, if you have a security setup, a vulnerability disclosure program, bug bounty program, it's maybe 5% of your apps or companies or websites security posture, right? 95% is like the stuff I mentioned. Secure choice of libraries, languages, architecture, maybe code reviews, external security teams, and so on. But it's 5%, and it's better than nothing. You can use security as a competitive advantage against your competitors, of course. Just as I came in today, I saw an Uber advertisement on the subway that said, oh, we anonymize phone numbers of our customers and our drivers, security as an advantage. That's literally what it said, or something like that, or security rethought, and so on. So apparently Uber wants to send out a message that they are very interested in security, and they want to let the drivers and the users know. Are you ready to start a vulnerability disclosure program? Especially for vulnerability disclosure programs, I would say yes, because the tiniest vulnerability disclosure program that you can have is security at yourdomain.com and setting up some information on your contact page, be it on the website and your app, say, hey, email security at mydomain.com and see how it goes. If you want to be a little bit more sophisticated on that, you can also partner with a third-party company, and one of those third-party companies is called HackerOne. HackerOne is the company that we're working with at Google, at least for the Google Play Security Rewards program. It's my understanding that we're the only Google team that actually works with HackerOne. All the other ones are self-hosted by Google. And obviously, you don't have to go to HackerOne. There's competitors like Bugcrowd, for example, and potentially more. And you don't have to partner. You can do it yourself, right? But partnering with them gives you a couple of advantages. HackerOne, for example, allows you to start a security vulnerability program in private mode, meaning the public doesn't even know about it, but HackerOne actually, they check out what your application is or your website, and then they know what kind of hackers they have on their platform, and then they invite like the top hackers privately, like 5 or 10 people who are very established on the website, who have a long history, kind of in the same space, like Android apps. And then they say, hey, here's a new program. Please check it out. Please check out the app. See if the program works for you. They can give you some initial feedback on like your terms of engagement, your policy scope, how you interact with security researchers. And those are generally very friendly people because they have a long established history on HackerOne. And we learned a lot. We did that for our own Google Play Security Rewards program. We learned a lot from these hackers initially before we went public. Also be careful that you don't want to go overboard in what's in scope and what is actually being paid out. For the Google Play Security Rewards program, we started with 3 simple kinds of security vulnerabilities, or categories, classes of security vulnerabilities. The first one is remote code execution, where everybody can take over your application over the network. The second one was some kind of private data leak to attackers. And the third one was access to components that were supposed to be protected. For example, private activities or private services or whatever. And obviously there's a lot more bugs in Android applications, but if we paid out more, we don't have that much budget, I have to say. We started very narrowly. For those who don't know how Google Play Security Rewards program goes, I'm going to talk about it later, but the gist of it is that we pay for bugs in top applications that are not ours. So applications that are in scope, for example, I think Dropbox is a partner. I know for sure Tinder is a partner. They were our first partner. I know for sure that, what's that Office application called? I already forgot. It's a very popular Office application. WPS Office or something like that. So we have got like 40 partners. So we pay out for bugs in 40 different applications. And if we paid out for more bug classes, or if we paid out more money, right now we don't pay that much. It's between $1,000 and $3,000 for a bug. If we paid out more, we would quickly run out of budget. So you want to make sure to actually not go to the world and say everything is in scope, and we pay out $10,000 per ticket. You're going to attract a lot of attention if you do that, but you're also going to run out of budget very soon. And so you're going to start with a private program on HackerOne. That's a possibility, or with any of the other platforms that help you build that. And then you can work towards a public program, go through a couple of iterations with the security researchers. You can literally ask them, hey, do you think the scope is good? How are the rules of engagement? Do you feel positive about that? And then ultimately you can flip the switch, and it's going to be one of the, I think, hundreds of companies that now use HackerOne to advertise and coordinate the vulnerability disclosure program or the bug bounty program. Things to consider on your end in addition to that. HackerOne, if you go for the paid service, they help you with triaging incoming security vulnerabilities. But you still need someone on your own team, in your own company, who can actually review, work with the HackerOne triage people, review bugs, understand the security impact, message the security impact to your software engineers who then have to fix the bug, right? If you never actually act on security tickets that are coming in, there's not a lot of value to building a bug bounty program or vulnerability disclosure program. You're just going to be in a very bad shape. You also need to handle potential disagreements, and there's going to be a lot of disagreements. If the disagreement is a security researcher going to get $5,000 for a report, or are they going to get $0 for a report? And that's why you need to have, ideally, a very tight and well-defined policy about what are the rules of engagement, what is in scope, and so on. My tip would be generous to keep hackers engaged in your program. That doesn't always mean that you have to pay out, but it means that you can tell them, oh, we don't really pay out for these, but we give you a one-time bonus of like $1,000, but please never report tickets like this again. That has worked for us in the past. Or if you want to make changes to the payout, that is in general for a certain class of vulnerabilities, be very generous and say you've got 90 days to report bugs that will then be paid out under the old payment structure, if the old payment structure is more generous than a new payment structure. It's very hard in general to attract hackers to your bug bounty program unless you're like Facebook, Google, and so on. So if someone is engaged with your maybe not quite as popular application or website or company, I think it's worthwhile to keep them engaged and be generous. Yeah, security only improves if you actually fix stuff that is You need someone internally who doesn't just communicate with developers to fix issues. You also need someone who can follow up, and even better, you need someone who can systematically understand why this bug happened and how can we make sure that we ourselves internally can find all of the bugs that are in the same class. Can we write some tools that find that? Can we use external tools to find those? Because what you don't want to be in a situation where you have 20 bugs of the same category in your application, and you pay out 20 times $3,000 or whatever. You want to pay out $3,000 once and then discover the other 19 internally. You also don't want to launch without getting all the necessary stakeholders involved. Can be management, PR, legal. They're all going to have opinions. The good news is, by now, there's so many companies out there that have established bug bounty or vulnerability disclosure programs that the legal side is pretty much discussed out, and you can just draw on the experiences of other companies. If you're new to this, I have to give you a warning. I need you to adjust your expectations. Unless you're high prestige or high reward, there's a very high chance that nobody's going to care about your application and you're never going to pay out. And just to give you numbers, for our Google Play Security Rewards program, as I said, there's 40 applications in scope. There's 3 different categories of bugs that we pay out for: remote code execution, PII leakage, and access to protected components. We get maybe, on average, 2 bugs a week. And so your scope is probably much smaller, and so adjust your expectations down. There's really a chance that nobody's ever going to report your stuff if you're not popular or high-paying enough. Bug bounties are not going to fix your application at scale. Even if a security researcher reports all the bugs of a certain category to you, obviously you're going to continue development on your application. And so you want to find the setup that works for you to avoid introducing new security vulnerabilities of the same type into your updates, into your future updates. Because all you're going to do is you're going to fund the security researcher who has written their own tools to find these bugs. But you need to write your own tools internally to find these bugs and not rely on an external security researcher to report them to you. And as I said, even with a triage partner who can be a part of the paid program by HackerOne, you're still going to need someone who handles it all internally. So how do you start a vulnerability disclosure program? Find a bug bounty partner if you don't want to self-host. HackerOne and BugCrowd are the most popular ones. However, there's a couple of others. So if you start looking for competitors of HackerOne or BugCrowd on Google, I think you're going to find a handful more. I have no preference between HackerOne and BugCrowd. The decision that we made is purely for business reasons that we picked HackerOne, but I don't want to bias you towards that. For what it's worth, since we're using HackerOne and you want to join the Google Play Security Rewards program, it makes it easier for us because we're on the same platform. But we also have partners that are on other platforms. It just makes the process a little bit harder for everybody. So you want to go to HackerOne. There's a forum where you can opt in, HackerOne response, and you can start creating your free self-guided program. You don't have to pay anybody for that. If you want to have more, HackerOne provides these services, so check them out. The necessary stakeholders have signed off at this point, right? So better triple check that. And now, hopefully, you attract some attention, you start triaging, you work with your HackerOne triage partner maybe, and then you start rejecting invalid bugs. You have to tell security researchers, hey, this one's not quite in scope, sorry for that. I think the most important part is never cut off communication with any security researcher. They're getting really cranky about that if they don't hear back in a certain amount of time. So especially for like initial reports, have a turnaround time in like less than 24 hours, ideally even less than that. We just say during a workday, thank you for sending that, we're going to triage now, I'll send you an update as soon as we have the triage complete, but no later than 3 days, and then follow up with them and always keep like channels of communication open. So Google Play Security Rewards Program, how does it work? So We launched 2017. We announced at Google I/O 2018. So from October 2017 to Google I/O 2018, which is like 6 months or so, we had a private program really where we used the lessons that we learned from these HackerOne hackers that are part of the core group of top hackers to fine-tune our policies, to fine-tune our rewards structure and other things like that. So it was really helpful to start off with a private invite-only program. Originally, we created that program because we realized if someone has a reliable exploit against the top application in Google Play, like Facebook, WhatsApp, any kind of application that has some 100 million installs, if someone manages to get a really good exploit on these, there's a high threat for the Android ecosystem as a whole. Maybe we get like some kind of worm like the one that's going around on Windows right now. And we really want to avoid that. And so we decided, how can we incentivize security researchers to find things on Android? And that's the first problem, because bug bounties on Android are fairly immature compared to bug bounties on Windows. So a lot of the security researchers really focus on Windows because they've been doing it for a long time. The payouts are very high and so on. So how do we get people to move off Windows and onto Android? To date, we paid out nearly $200,000 in additional rewards. The way the process goes, and ignore that, we're going to zoom in the yellow part. The way the process goes is essentially security researcher finds a bug, they communicate to a partner like Dropbox, then they file a parallel ticket with our program on HackerOne and say, I found this bug in Dropbox, Dropbox has fixed it, please give me my reward. And then Adam on our side, he talks to Dropbox and says, hey, did you really fix that? Dropbox says yes, and we pay out. And that's the whole process. The only real criteria we have here is that a security researcher's bug is in that scope that I mentioned a couple of times, 3 different classes of vulnerabilities, and that the application is already fixed. We don't want to hear about bugs that haven't been fixed yet, and we made a very intentional decision because we don't really want to position Google as purchasing like 0-day exploits for popular applications. That would be kind of bad, and so we don't want to hear about anything that hasn't been fixed yet. But if it has been fixed, we're happy to give you a bonus and say, oh yeah, thanks for fixing Dropbox or Tinder or whatever. Here's an additional $1,000. It doesn't even matter what the reward structure is of the original application developers. We have application developers that are working with us. They don't pay out anything. They literally have a $0 reward, but we still give a $1,000 bonus, essentially. The lessons we learned as part of this program is the key. There's 2 keys. The first one is clear policy. You want to avoid discussions and debates about what's in scope as much as possible. And the second one is you have to be responsive. There's a lot of companies who are doing a really bad job handling incoming security tickets and like not updating the security researcher for like 90 days or 45 days or however long. And that makes them very anxious because they feel like the security researchers, they feel like they're cut off. So I can only stress communication and crystal clear policy is the most important part. If you want to join the Google Play Security Rewards Program, you can check out the HackerOne.com/partner/Google Play. There's an application form. Right now, we still have a couple of limits on what partners we accept, which application developers we accept. Because if we didn't have these limits, it would be broke very soon from our budget. But yeah, if you have a sizable app and you would like to partner with us on a bug bounty program, please check it out. And you can also, if you have additional questions, email gpsrp@google.com, Google Play Security Rewards Program, or ask me now. We've got like 2 minutes or whatever for questions. Thank you very much, folks.